Right,
Did you
okay.
get mine, Carl?
Hang
What?
on a minute, flipping it. One
Why are you
minute I'm
sending him a
begging
money
for money, and the
request?
next minute I don't know what the hell's going on.
No,
That
because
could-
my computer wasn't working, so I don't know if you actually got it.
Yeah, yours came through. I've already spent it on popcorn.
Typical.
You
You just asked for one, Carl.
What's that?
3 months payment now.
Oh yeah, I was just about to get onto that. Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna be really nice to David now. Yeah, I was gonna mention that the 2 month payment of £50 is now due as of now, David. So I forgot to mention it last week, David, and
Right.
or I mentioned it last week and you'd gone. So I just thought I'd mention that. I have received. I've received basically everybody's money, except for Andy and David and a couple of others, simply because I didn't tell you last week because it's my fault. So do apologise, David, but you now know.
Yeah.
You now know. I appreciate that. Right, so we are going to get started. We did actually start a couple of minutes ago, but I couldn't get a word in edgeways. Margaret just constantly talking about a computer and men coming into the house, and it's just like we don't want to know. We just don't want to know. That's just too personal, right? Talking about men in your house, Anne.
No, I haven't had one in my house, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Oh, we can pop around later on.
You know what? There was no actual. I didn't need a link there. I was just moving
dear.
on. But now you said it.
Follow on. It just seemed to follow on.
Yeah.
All
you've
in the
had
timing.
But
I
no,
was just about to say you've had no men around for a while. Now I'm on it. Now, so nothing from you, Anne.
no.
Right. Okay. Talking about men, David, for once.
No.
Okay.
Oh,
Judith went along a Roman road from the other day that might not be a Roman road, but she's got
Not
some
really.
images. I'm still coddle poddling an idea for a video because I got to do two comparisons. When she was doing her bit of the Roman road in Yorkshire, I was doing my bit of the Roman road down this end, and it was just like really. Neither really show much in the way of Roman, so it's
perhaps she was just roaming.
Roaming all over the moor it was. Yeah.
with the two annoying dogs.
Oh, they had a lovely day.
Were you masticating while you were filming?
Unfortunately, yes. I didn't realise the thing who picked it up. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like
It was very hot. Sorry.
I thought it was
I'll
your
turn
dog.
the sound down. You won't hear it.
I thought it was your dog.
Well, some of it was the dog. Some of it was the husband. Some of it was my feet in the grass because the grass was quite dry, so that was rustling about.
No, I really appreciate you filming. I'm sure I will put something together. It's just a lot happening. So nothing else from you, Judith. Then.
Oh, did you see The Rock? What did you think of The Rock?
Which rock?
I sent you a video of the rock. It was like a big stone that had some carvings in it.
When did you send that over?
When I sent the rest of it. Oh, don't make me go and look for my phone.
Oh no, don't do it now. But I'm not exactly. So what? There were some Roman carvings on it.
I have no idea what they were. It could have been some kids. There were just some random. There were no words or what you'd call a symbol. There were just some lines.
Well, the Prince was there, wasn't he? Because he was symbol for a while.
Yeah, that would have been him.
Purple squiggle.
Only a few of you got that joke. Sorry, sorry about that. Right, Andy, anything from you, love?
No, the site that I was talking about near Barcelona, when I've looked back and found out where it was, it refers to it as a Roman Greco site, not Carthaginian. But I'm sure I came across something Carthaginian, but in all the stuff I've tried to find out about it, it doesn't mention it at all. So I haven't sent you any pictures.
Is this Cartagena?
Cartagena.
Yeah, Cartagena.
Yeah. No, it was Esther something or other.
But... there's Cartagena and there's La Kentum, and there's La Ville Joassa, and there's also Cartea. No,
I can't. It's north of Barcelona. On the
There's
right
a
on
song
the,
there.
on the coast.
Barcelona.
Hmm.
Sorry.
That's my favourite song by Freddie Mercury.
And
Oh.
the Barcelona Olympics was 1992.
Yeah.
Barcelona.
I was dead impressed with that because there was a radio question and I decided to put that in. Oh no, the Punic Wall Interpretation Center in Carthage. Yeah, it's here. Oh right, we'll have to put that one on. Roger, anything from you?
No.
Right, so we're going to be doing the purple people tonight. We're going to do a little bit about Hannibal and his retirement. We're going to be doing that weird little Italian city in Rome that they've been excavating that was allied with Hannibal. We're going to be looking at some carving styles and trying to work out why I was so awesome in the Channel 4 cold case episode that was last night. But I just wanted to mention that. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And I had an acting job come through earlier on. Michelle was just so busy. I said, Michelle, do you mind me doing this weird scene in a film? I'm getting paid really well for it. It's a naked scene with somebody else. And I said, yeah, that's okay, Michelle, that's fine. And she said, what was all that about? Yeah, I said, I told you I was going to be doing it. And then she just wandered out the room, not knowing what I'd said. At least I've told her.
That's what you say.
She'd be in shock.
Yeah, but I told her.
It doesn't involve any voting, does it?
No, it's all safe. Right, okay then. So we are going to get started, and I've got to make sure I remember to do that thing for Andy, and looking forward to doing a bit of geography next week, sort of going around the British coast, sort of a few explorers, and so loads still going on. I'm really looking forward to doing my my Roman writers and my Greek writers. So loads, not even touched the surface yet. So let's just get straight into it. And let's just do the sharing. As you know, Roger, sharing is caring. Yeah, Rog. Okay, we're on the screen now. Right, okay, here we go. We're on it. Right, we're on it. And there.
With the cockerel.
And it works out straight away. Look at that. We've got those remains there at Cartagena, there on the right, there in the bottom corner. So we've got the classical orders that we're going to mention, and I've just got this little quote about classical orders that I just want to read out. We got this site in Italy, which is directly linked to the Carthaginians, a city that was allied to them. We've got a bit of Phoenician stuff here, a load of Phoenician stuff, the purple people, right? Let's just crack on. And today, I don't know what the hell that is. Today I saw that wonderful film 28 years later. It's a shame I wasn't in it, but things are happening. Right, so what I wanted to mention, want to mention the Phoenicians is directly linked to the Carthaginians, and this is directly then linked. Who's this? Andy, can you let him on? Good.
Yeah, I've done it, it's Emma.
Oh, Emma, fair enough. I want this week's linking in with last week, and it links in with the week before, and it links in with next week as well. And what we're thinking of is this is a Phoenician ship at Lebanon, as it once was, otherwise known as Port Sidon. And when it says Phoenician ship, it's basically a Phoenician boat, a trading vessel. So lots of the images are sort of artistically impressionable things. And the Phoenicians themselves, I just wanted to get an order, an idea of who these people were. So Phoenicia, the Phoenicians, an ancient region, an ancient people, an ancient trading pact, corresponding very much with the Mediterranean, around the Lebanese coast, modern day Syrian coastline, Israel, north of that as well into the likes of Turkey, all the way west again into the likes of the boot of Italy and Carthage, and even over to Marseille. It's all over the place. But primarily, these people were the antithesis, or the founding people of the Carthaginians. So that's one thing to remember. So,
Right.
so again, lots of what we do see could be said to be reconstructional. And so one thing about the Phoenicians is that they're not fixed in the same sense as any normal empire. So you could think about ancient Egypt, you could think about the Roman Empire, you could think about the good old British Empire at its height in 1920, where we could actually have a map and say, this is where we are. But the Phoenicians were here, there, and everywhere, all at different points in time. And it's very likely that most of them would have thought, well, you know, we're sort of these traders, these merchants, and they wouldn't probably never call themselves the Phoenicians, some of them. So it's basically a trade route, it's a trade pact. And these are the people that were around the Mediterranean over 3,000 years ago. In other words, the Phoenicians could be said to be the people who came after the Mycenaeans, the Minoans, which obviously their civilization became extinct 3,600 years ago in regards to the likes of the eruption of Thera on Santorini and the wiping out of Crete. But these Phoenicians are another people who saw trade at their heart. And we think about, well, let's not get political. We think about the Gaza Strip, we think about Beirut, we think about Lebanon, we think about Syria, we think into Tyre as well, or Tyre, however you want to pronounce it, which is basically up there in the Levant as well, all in that area, all on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. Now, so this takes these Phoenicians out from where they are on the right-hand side of the screen, out from the likes of Lebanon, out from the likes of Cyprus, right? Out from the likes of the landscape of modern-day Syria. So the word Phoenician is more of a designation. It's like, it's like, oh, you know, we're people from the United Kingdom. There's something I would never call myself. It's a designation. The Phoenix people, the Phoenix people, Phoinix, the Phoenix people, the Phoenicians, is not known to have a reflex native to the Phoenicians. So in other words, would I really have called myself a Phoenician? But it's a designation. It's like an area of trade. It's like a trading group. They typically identify themselves by their city-states. So Carthage, Utica, the likes of Palermo on Sicily. You might go all the way to the Balearics. You might think about going out into Cadiz. So I come from Cadiz, right? So I wouldn't say I'm a Phoenician. I come from Cadiz, but I'm one of the Phoenician trading people. So when we think about this, is that they pushed out into the Atlantic Ocean, and their ideas of trade and influence are very much coming from that vat of influence. So let's try and find another map as well, which, there we go. This is from that vat of influence that is very much Egyptian. Okay, so this is a little bit of a better sort of map, really. So this is where we're going. So what we've got is that the commonality is trade, right? That's basically it. So maybe the comparison with the Phoenicians, and I'm just going to chuck this out there, is the Vikings. So we're going to go Vikinging, we're going to go Phoenicianing, which isn't a word at all. Vikinging is not a word that really existed up until many years ago either. So Phoenicianing, there we go. We're going to go Phoenicianing out into the Mediterranean. So they're known into the Adriatic, you know, they're known into the Aegean and beyond, right? And all these little bits of the questions that sort of crop up. How did they come across amber, you know, and how did they come across tin? You know, they must have come from somewhere. So it's very likely as well that this idea of being a Phoenician, right, can easily be addressed as far back as 1,300 years BC or 1,400 years BC, 3,400 years ago. So these people as like a trading people, their world, if you want to call it like a pseudo empire, lasted for about 1,000 years, right? This sort of sense of trade worked for 1,000 years, which in many ways is far longer than the British Empire lasted, you know, because they were very much traders. They were not big conquerors, right? And we know about from letters from these traders, in brackets, the Phoenicians going to the Egyptian court in 1,400 years BC, 3,400 years ago. So we know. So basically, these letters, Sidon, Tyre or Tyre, Byblos, which is also there, right? So you're thinking about this. We've got letters from the leaders of these localities, which are Phoenician people. You know, these are Phoenician cities, right? And this is, again, what's standing out. You can see my lyrics here. What's standing out is the Phoenicians were a people that lasted because they peaceably traded, right? So let's go back to some things. You know, Anne was mentioning last week, it's always about warfare. It's always about fighting. You know, it's always, you know, why is there are peaceful people. For example, northern part of Italy, the people of Tuscany, the Etruscans, they were peaceable people. The likes of the Phoenicians, peaceable people. And I know it'd be wrong for me to say that the Egyptians were peaceable people, but they didn't really go out much further than Egypt, right? So, yeah, it'd be wrong for me to say the Egyptians are peaceable. But when you actually get into the Egyptians, they're more peaceable than you think, right? So you know, the other week, I don't know if it's last week or the week before, you wanted me to talk about Roman governance, how Rome organized itself. You know, was there a Roman police force? Was there Roman MPs? Were there Roman councillors? Were there Roman magistrators? Were there Roman consuls? Were there Roman senators? Some of that is actually, yes, there were, right? Some are, no, there weren't. And I think this is something that we need to get to grips with. And lots of this stuff that Rome has enticed upon itself has come from all these other worlds that Rome absorbed. So Rome is a magpie. Rome is a magpie of the highest degree. And oh my God, Michelle's just showed me a wonderful greater spotted woodpecker on the food feeder, which I'm sure Peter would love for you all to know. So these had some of the oldest forms of government. And one second, I'm just going to finish my drink, guys. Coffee, please. Thank you. Starting again. So the Phoenicians themselves inspired the way that other worlds would lead themselves. The Greeks, the people of Asia Minor. Maybe they inspired the Etruscans, right? But the Phoenicians are a foundation stone of a family of influence. This was there. It's said in my notes here, if we want to put this out across properly, the oldest form of government in the Phoenician cities seems to have been kingship, right? What we don't mean the good old kingdoms, right? But kingship, having a little bit of power over people, just enough to keep things together, and everyone goes off and trade, right? So it was a loose organization. So these people would work together. You know, these these cities would work together with sort of a wealthy family at its top, and it would work together, right? And that's really interesting because that's thousands of years later when we talk about what's going on in Italy, right? You've all sort of, you all know about Da Vinci and all the sort of organization families that were in Italy at the time, right, in the 1500s, right? And the likes of Italy 500 years ago was based on this model that comes from the old Phoenician world, where you get these families who sort of organize themselves to sort of the Genoese and the trading people of Italy, right? This is based on an old form that comes back from the Phoenicians. And obviously another wealthy family takes over Sidon. Another wealthy family takes over Carthage or Leptis or and so on and so on. So this is their way of governance, and it works. It works, and so much that they're not killing each other, right? Which is a really important point. So this was a federation structure, a federation of the cities on a large scale. Never seemed to occur, but this was a federated structure that they all sort of worked together, and sort of there was some coordination, and it was their way of reacting to external factors. So obviously they would come together as Phoenicians, as a body, to work out external problems that were threatening them, for example. So Byblos, it is on our map there, is something that is a world of people that has a commercial and religious connection with Egypt, going way back, right? Going as far back as 4,600 years ago. So the foundations of Phoenicia may have gone back well over 4,600 years. And you can hear that in this idea of trade. And one thing I really need to put across is I need to attack what we were talking about last week, that it's always about warfare. It's not always about warfare. If you want to look at Central American people like the Olmec and the Toltecs and the Zapotecs, it's not always about warfare there, well before the Maya and the Aztec. It's not always about warfare in the Mediterranean. And it's so when we think, right, there is a vulnerability in the way that the Phoenicians organize themselves, and it's when they come across Rome. Rome couldn't work out this idea that you have groups of people organizing and controlling cities in part of a unified federal structure, right? Which wasn't like them. It was very different, right? The Romans couldn't cope with that. And there was a time in history that the Egyptians would capture and take control of that red zone in the Levant. But eventually the Phoenicians would always gain control of themselves. They would always take the trade at their heart. So what makes you powerful is your trade, the Phoenicians would say. They didn't say what makes you powerful is conquering other countries. And this is really what's important when you start to think about the Phoenicians. The Romans saw power was that you conquer other countries. The Phoenicians saw themselves as powerful with the trade that was all over the place. But there's one thing that the Phoenicians would always face is problems from the east. The Assyrians, the Persians, and so on. And bit by bit, what would happen is that the Phoenicians would be taken over by external powers. And their idea of this Phoenician trading network would slowly diminish under the Persians in roughly the 330s, 338 BC to be precise. And another problem another problem that the Phoenicians faced was the likes of Alexander the Great. So when Alexander the Great is wandering across, all the way through Asia, going to fight great Darius and his great horde. Alexander the Great was then coming across with these Phoenicians as well. He was seeing these Phoenicians as another power that Alexander the Great would wish to control and bring into his own world. But it would only be the likes of Carthage when we see the end of Carthage, which we've already seen the end in 146 BC, that we actually start to see the end of the Phoenician dream. But for a while, whilst the Romans were taking over the old Phoenician world, like the Romans had taken over Egypt, like the Romans had taken over the whole of Africa, Europe, Iberian Peninsula, all over the place. The Romans were conquering everywhere, right? In regards to the Mediterranean Sea, right? The Romans for a while allowed Tyre to remain self-governing and Sidon to remain self-governing, like the Nabateans, right? But eventually things would change. So again, what we've got an idea of these people, we've got an idea of these people through carvings, and when we're talking about the Phoenicians, are they also colonizers, right? Well, colonizers slightly different from empire building, right? They would steadily influence, and it would steadily allow people to see. So obviously you're placing people out there into Cyprus, for example, Anatolia, right? And the reason why Carthage became very powerful was it was where it is. It was a perfect location for trade, and we've already looked at Carthage, a chief maritime and commercial power in the Mediterranean, as you can tell. So obviously the Carthaginians becoming independent in their own right from the 500s onwards. And you're thinking about this idea of Phoenicia and Phoenician trade in regards to Spain and in regards to heading further up north as well. And the Phoenicians were trading all sorts of things, limestone, for example. This is one example. For example, the Phoenicians were exporting cedar wood and pine wood from the Levant, for example, and murex shells. Murex shells come up, and I mentioned at the beginning, I said refer to the Phoenicians as the purple people, because the murex shell itself, this big, these big shells that they were able to obtain, which created purple cloaks, Tyrian purple cloaks. We're looking at, for example, great works of embroidery, great works of carving in stone. You're talking about they're exporting wine as well. They're exporting metalwork, and a massive export in glass, glazed faience beads. So let's have a little look at some of these. So there we go, Phoenician necklaces made from glass beads. And again, these being traded across the Mediterranean. They were mass traders in salt, and you can imagine that salt is going to be quite available from places like the Dead Sea, and in fact Cyprus, dried fish, and they're referring to transit trade as well, where you would trade a little bit with them, they would trade a little bit with you, and goods would sort of move around. So in the artistic products of Phoenicia and the references to these people, so a Phoenician writing, a basalt relief stele, so it's a carving of King Kulamua, And we're thinking about, again, from the 800s. So they're telling us about themselves. They're telling us about who they are and where they are in history. They're not to be forgotten. Again, thinking about this limestone sarcophagus, the king of Byblos, Ahimram, and this itself dating from roughly it's in the 900s. So ivory, they're getting ivory from Africa. We've mentioned their wood. Ivory and wood carving became specialities across the Phoenician world. And we can't forget the mass trade in gold. The Phoenicians also, the Phoenicians, through their network of sailing practice, they controlled Cyprus. So whenever you go to Cyprus, you do hear about the Phoenicians in Cyprus. And so in Cyprus, you've got access to copper. Glass blowing, and this is a first. If you ever get a question in regards to one of those pub quizzes. So if they say, who invented glass blowing? It was the Romans, obviously. No, it wasn't. Glass blowing was probably invented over in the Levant, roughly by about 100 years BC. And glass blowing was invented by the Phoenicians. So all those milk bottles that you take advantage of, and all those glass bottles are associated with the Phoenicians. And the Phoenician language, they've got their own language. They've got a common language. Now that's one thing. This is rather interesting. So we've got a sense of governance. So we've got Byblos. You might think about Carthage. You might think about powerful families organizing these cities, right? And then you obviously you've got a sense of kingship within these cities, right? And they're not warring against each other again. Unlike the Greek states, where the Greeks are fighting against each other all the time, they're organized like that. But they do have a Phoenician language, which is common to the Phoenician world. So in other words, when we think about the euro across Europe, whereas everyone in Europe speaking different languages, but the euro was used across Europe. The parallel with that is across the Phoenician world. They're developing a common language and a common form of writing. So it's a bit like the English language is used in many countries in the world by many different people. And those different people might actually speak different languages, but they might use the English language for credit and commerce. And this is exactly when we think about the Phoenicians. And their script or their where their script might be different, but is very similar to Hebrew. And it's in a way it was they also use cuneiform, which is a Mesopotamian form of writing, but obviously this is adapted into their Phoenician alphabet, into Hebrew type form, and within their alphabet itself. And this is one thing, when people talk about the modern alphabet, right, it's adopted from the Phoenicians. They've got 22 characters in their alphabet, not a million, but 22 characters in their alphabet. 22.
They write from right to left or left to right, do you know?
That's a question. That's for your own little research.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer that, simply because we're just doing a little bit of an overview of the Phoenicians. But I'm sure I'm going to say I don't know on that one. But if you want to do that as a little bit of research, that'd be great. So when we think about Byblos, and we think about the earliest form of Phoenician alphabet, the 22 characters that they're devising through a cuneiform form. They're developing this alongside Hebrew, and it's likely that these characters were developed as far back as 3,400 years ago. So when we think about ancient Egypt with their hieroglyphs, the Phoenicians are developing an alphabet that is then a method of writing that is adopted by the Greeks, is then adopted by the Romans, and then you start to see why the Phoenicians are so important to everything that we know today. And I think this is a really interesting map that we've got in front of us. It's got it a little bit simple. The date there is 331 BC, right? And obviously Carthage is its own thingy by then. However, it could be seen as part of the Phoenician family. And the other thing as well is you don't get the references of the other thing is that Carthaginians don't turn on their own and conquer the Levant. Just think Hannibal could have just invaded Egypt. Hannibal could have invaded Turkey. He didn't. He chose not to. And why did he not do that? Because at heart, maybe Carthage was not founded as a conquering world like the Romans. Except in the Second Punic War, it did turn out that way under the likes of Hannibal after 218 BC. So the Phoenicians' most remarkable and distinctive contribution to art and civilization. So let's just look a little bit at some of these. So and I made a little. We're actually not doing much more about the Phoenicians now, but I've decided to put a few more images up. And I thought, what do Phoenicians look like? So this is maybe the headgear of a Phoenician woman. It's not Egyptian looking, but the men look Egyptian looking, or they might look Mesopotamian looking, right? And there are some of their traders. So when I say the Egyptian bit, right, more Mesopotamian, but you can sort of think about the robes and that. So when we think about Egypt and so on, but sort of Mesopotamian looking, sort of pointed beards. Now, this is one thing that we've mentioned before, the pointed beards. I think when we were looking at the Mesopotamians and the Babylonians with this idea of a pointed beard, so these sort of traders. But again, I'm sure that different Phoenician, like Tyre and Byblos and the likes of Carthage and maybe the Balearics, all these different people probably had slightly different ways that they dressed. Religious practice in Phoenician. Now, this is one interesting thing, right? Whereas the language is very similar, whereas they organize themselves in a sort of similar form of governance, religious practice in Phoenician cities varied, and each city had its own set of deities, and this is rather interesting in itself. So, if you represent you see yourself as a Phoenician, but you would have a different belief structure in Tyre that you might actually see all the way at one of your settlements in Spain, for example. Nonetheless, beliefs and rituals shared many characteristics, some of which may have been the result of extended cultural contact. So remember, these people over 1,000 years have got some commonality. And this might interest us as we get to the end of looking at the Phoenicians today. That at Sidon, which is around Lebanon way, the number of female deities increased. Why that was, we don't know. And there was a very powerful female goddess called Astarte or Ashtart, and it's very interesting that they've got an increasing number of female deities, and why that is, who knows? Who really knows? And again, if you go on the internet, you type in Phoenicians and you type in what did the Phoenicians look like, right? You get loads of different representations, and I actually started thinking that it would be a shame not to mention the Phoenicians. It'd be a shame to not have them in our history. And this is why I wanted to do this tonight, because it leads us nicely into different areas. And there are so many illustrations of Phoenician vessels We get one or two from carvings. We get one or two here and there. But again, we looked at that vessel last week from the base stone at as you got to the Acropolis, Lindos in Rhodes, and that's really interesting because Rhodes comes into its own when we talk about Hannibal in a short while. But again, this is a maritime world, and it hits back at this thing that human beings are always fighting in history. Do human beings always need to fight in history? The answer is no. And the Phoenicians are an example of that. The Etruscans are an example of that. Rome isn't. And look at this beautiful carving. This is actually a carving that is on a sarcophagus. And I wanted to bring you this. I've got a couple of carvings like this. And this could be a vessel. You've got a rudder there. You've got a mask, and it looks, this could be from any period up until maybe 600 years ago. So there's, this is a typical small open water vessel, probably coastal huggers again. That's the word, coastal hugging. They're hugging the coast, but they're trading them nevertheless. And again, lots of these vessels would have gone down somewhere in the Mediterranean over time with their cargoes. Again, that's the same one, same illustration. I think I've got the location coming up. Hang on, have I got the location? I thought I had. I think that one is actually in the Louvre, in Paris, but you can clearly see there. And actually, what we're going to do. Andy's the sailor. Andy, how durable is that as a vessel out at sea?
Oh, it looks pretty good. It's got high sides. It's got a big sail, so it'll cope with lots of things. Nice big high bow, so it will take quite big waves.
Yes, and the prow and the aft are really well suited.
The what? Sorry.
The prow and the aft are really well suited. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's also got what looks like a little bowsprit with a sort of forestay sail on it, which is unusual.
I was going to mention that. And obviously, that's something that you would see on later ships, isn't it? But not at this stage.
It's quite similar in shape, the whole shape, to that one from Rhodes as well, isn't it? From Lindos.
Yeah, it is. It is very,
like you said.
Shape. Yeah,
a lot of them were that shape, though, weren't they? So.
Yeah. And built in that way for just the simple process of trade. And I think
no sign of any rowing points, though.
No,
which is interesting.
No. Yeah, so obviously we are talking about these people were great navigators with the sail, and when you got for example the trireme, that's. You could say that could be more useful for warfare than likely normal open water sailing. But it goes to tell us, it goes to instruct us that this point that humanity doesn't always need to go out fighting. You can have a way to do things, and everybody lives happily ever after. But the Persians didn't think that. The Romans didn't think that. And at times the Egyptians didn't think that either. So what we do have as well is we've got other representations on this fresco. That we've got a draft animal there. We've got some kind of cart, and again, these people are farmers as well. So they're not just sea traders; they're farmers. And again, this is directly associated with the Phoenicians, and so we get these little snippets. And this is, I was looking at this. This is a reconstruction from a carving, and I can remember that obviously you've got fish there to represent water, but this is oared, which is very different from the one that we've just seen. But there are spears in there, and again, that might indicate that it could be associated with warfare. But again, when the idea of warfare comes in, or if this is directly Phoenician, I don't know. But again, this is Ord, and this is basically one of those things. How accurate is this? But this is Ord and it sailed. But I got to be honest with you, Andy. A Viking would be quite happy in that boat, wouldn't he? Yeah. I can't hear you, Andy. Your mic's on.
Sorry, yes, that would do what they want to do. Quite shallow drafted as well, probably. So.
Yeah. So I would take you out in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Not just a coastal hugger. And this is the whole point about this, that that where you've got a design of a ship, something that seems to go back thousands of years. People are still sailing these types of vessels when they're going over to the New World. Right. Not a lot has changed. And the Vikings were certainly using exactly these types of vessels when they were going out Vikinging in the Atlantic in the 10, 11, 1200s. And again, all these little bits of illustrations and so on. And this is another one.
One thing that would be interesting to remember would be if you've got a load of oars, you've got to have a lot of people to row it, and therefore you've got no room for cargo.
Well, I think you've answered the question, then, haven't you? That obviously, if you've got all these oars, they're all there for a reason.
Yeah.
But again, how much of this is actually directly associated with the Phoenicians, I don't know, right? But these are actually on the when you look, for example, in publications, right? A lot of room is taken up with the people oaring there, and maybe the person who's actually drawn this hasn't taken account of the fact that this is taking up all the room, and also the Phoenicians were traders, not warfarers. So I think there's a little bit of interpretation there that may have gone astray. So, folks, what we're going to do, we are going to go over to talk a little bit about the story of Hannibal and the end of Hannibal. So again, this is a question that was being asked, and it's not an easy question to answer, right? So I've got to be very careful what I'm doing now, because I just don't want to spend a load of time doing Hannibal. But I think talking about the end days of Hannibal will very much help us understand again how the Romans were thinking. So, and actually, this is not a bust of Hannibal. This is a bust of Antiochus III, right? Who's actually, but it looks very similar to Hannibal, actually. This is Antiochus III is actually the leader, the king of the Seleucid Empire, right? Which is actually a massive empire. So this comes into play. So basically, what happened was when hang on a minute, not that. What happened was when Carthage fell, and well, when we say fell, after the Second Punic War and this terrible defeat of Scipio over Hannibal, wiping out Hannibal's army, basically in 202 BC, and then the peace is 201 BC, right? What we find is Hannibal out of a job, right? So with Hannibal out of a job, he basically sort of tries to reorganize Carthage as a statesman. And as you know, in regards to an example of Winston Churchill, when you've got a wartime leader and it turns into a statesman, sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't, right? But Hannibal became a bit tired of being a statesman. He had got weary, and and he disappeared from the likes of Carthage. 7 years after Zama, in the year 195 BC, Hannibal decided to ally himself with Antiochus III, right? So he disappeared. He left Carthage, and Rome was thinking, Carthage is actually getting itself back on its feet again. But this is the man that Hannibal went to in 195 BC. And he wasn't going to live many years after that either. And this guy, Antiochus, who looks a very Western type leader, and there's one of Antiochus's coins, Antiochus III. This guy was, in fact, the leader of a big empire. And in fact, that's pretty bloody big, right? And the Seleucids and the Romans didn't like each other at all. Well, the Egyptians were in the middle. Nobody was touching the Egyptians. And what we've got another Roman writer called Cicero. Again, this is why we've got to do Roman writers. So if we go through all the list of Roman writers that I've mentioned so far, and we haven't even really got into the nitty-gritty, we've got about 15 different names. This is why we've got to look at the Roman historians and where they sit in and where they go. And he went to Antiochus and basically became a military advisor to Antiochus, right? A military advisor to Antiochus. And Antiochus, this great king of the Seleucid Empire. And there it is in 301 BC. However, this isn't 301 BC. This is the year 195 BC. This is the 193 BC. And basically, Hannibal, after fleeing to Antiochus, would be given command of Antiochus's armies. And the army led by Hannibal was never ever going to be successful again. It was a bit like Napoleon coming back from Elba. Napoleon, his great days were behind him in that 100 Years' War, when he'd come back from Elba and was defeated by Wellington at Waterloo. So again, there's lots of similarities between Hannibal and Napoleon. And I mentioned this whole point of Hannibal. So Hannibal, by 190, was in command of an army of the Seleucids. And actually, Hannibal had plans to cause a rebellion in his age-old Carthage, and he was going to cause a coup d'etat, because the Carthaginians, by about 190, were very friendly with the Romans because they had no choice. And just off, and what we've got, hang on, we got a battle coming up, right? Hang on, what's that there? Hang on, something happened to the screen. Right there. Good. So what we've got is that Hannibal is leading a fleet, right? And Hannibal leading this fleet is defeated at sea, right? And there is where he's defeated at sea. And it's a navy that is a joint navy. It's a Roman navy, and it's a navy that is also led by the people of Rhodes. I was going to say Rhodesians, that's not right. By the people of Rhodes. So it's the people of Rhodes and the Romans are unified against Antiochus, right? And this is the thing that is really getting into Hannibal. He's he used to be this successful general, right? And now he isn't. He can't do right for wrong. And what we've got is, again, this is that sort of sea battle where he's defeated in August 190 BC. And again, the Seleucids being led by Hannibal are not successful. So this is where we start to get into all these other things. The Romans, after defeating a number of armies led by Hannibal and other leaders of the Seleucid Empire, the Romans offer an ultimatum to the Seleucids. We'll have peace with you as long as you give us Hannibal. And what Hannibal thought was what Antiochus was going to hand him over. So Hannibal fled north. And Hannibal fled north to another empire that was very, very anti-Roman. This empire, which you've probably never, ever heard of. The Empire of Bithynia, which is actually another sort of, it was much bigger than this at times, but Bithynia. And Hannibal fled to the king of Bithynia that was also really anti-Roman, right? And the Bithynians were involved in a war against Pergamon at the time, the great city of Pergamon, which some of you may have heard of. And what happened is quite simple. The king of Bithynia, the king of Bithynia, was given an ultimatum by the Romans: hand over Hannibal, or we will destroy your kingdom. We will destroy it. It will no longer exist. So Bithynia, right, was being forced to hand over Hannibal. And what happened was that Hannibal was surrounded at a location by Roman troops. And instead of being captured by the Romans, he committed suicide. And the year is 181 BC. But very, very interestingly, lots of Roman historians write about Hannibal, and lots of them can't agree what really happened to him. For example, Pliny the Elder, another Roman writer, and Plutarch that we've mentioned, record that Hannibal's tomb was at a location called Libissa, which not really sure where that is in this letter. And it's also said by these Roman writers that they say before dying, Hannibal is said to have left behind a letter declaring, "Let us relieve the Romans from the anxiety they have so long experienced, since they think it tries their patience too much to wait for an old man's death." And the whole point with this is that our friend Hannibal will never rest until the Romans have killed him. And by the way, like Libicea, Pliny basically mentions, he's not vague, he's a bit vague where this Libicea is where Hannibal is actually buried. There's actually a mound, and this is possibly near modern day Anatolia in Turkey, but we're not really sure where he is properly buried. This is what my notes are telling me, which is a bit of a shame. Another great person in history. And it basically says, another Roman writer, finally we'll finish now, Appian wrote of a prophecy about Hannibal's death, which states that Libicea, which is where he's buried, Libycian earth shall cover Hannibal's remains. This, he wrote, made Hannibal believe that he would die in Libya, but instead it was Libya, which is in Anatolia and not Libya. And loads of people write loads of different stories about Hannibal. But that's the end of Hannibal. So I wanted to actually give you that because that brings the whole Punic War to close, but it doesn't, because we're going to do something else now, right? And this is something that, oh, by the way, Drina said she couldn't make it this week. And she gives a profuse love to everybody except Roger.
Oh,
Sorry, Roger. As she said you can keep Roger. She said to me, Roger.
Okay, right.
So it's just me and you, Roger.
Okay.
It's just me and you. Right. So what she said last week was she said there's been an archaeological excavation in a place known as Agento in Italy, right? And Agento in Italy is an absolutely fascinating place, because we've got something that's been excavated really, really recently, right? And let's show where Ugento is before we actually, and then we'll have a break. So we've got these bits of wall. Where's the bloody map? There it is. There's Ugento. And we'll this she said, oh my god, did you mention this, that? And I didn't, because we just didn't. I wanted to do this last week, but I've kept it for this week so that Drina can see it, but she can't make it. So Ugento, here we go. Italian archaeologists working in the city of Ugento uncovered sections of an extensive ancient defensive network intended to protect the city and its inhabitants from an advancing Roman army. So we'll do this in a minute, right? So this is the wall. This is one of the corners of the wall. So we've got another little bit. It says here over 170 meters of wall and 450 lead projectiles from the Roman siege discovered in an Italian city allied with Hannibal. So there it is, the remains of the wall. It looks like a really strong, powerful wall, made with blocks like this. And so the wall was originally built in the 300s, but was significantly enhanced a century later. So that's in the 200s, when its thickness grew to 20 feet wide. A 20 feet wide wall. Again, that's bloody thick. Near one of the corner bastions, the team encountered a destruction layer that contained 450 lead sling bullets, which is basically, let's have a little look at a lead sling bullet, which is, I think, there. That's a lead sling bullet. And 9 iron bolts, which are these things, fired from Roman Scorpio machines, weapons that resembled large stationary crossbows. Oh, go on, guys. Let's look what a Scorpio machine looks like. Let's have a little look at a Scorpio machine. Scorpio machines. Scorpio machine. Hopefully we'll get it straight away. You can't get them. You can't get these on eBay, by the way, Roger.
okay.
Scorpio machines. Well, is it going to come up with it? There's a Scorpio machine. Basically, these levers at this end, right? That's what you use to tighten it, to get the tension. You draw that back. So these little oh, hang on. Can I just? No, I can't draw on this. Hang on a minute. So these levers here, these things, you use them to tighten, and it draws the bow back, which is there, right? And it puts so much tension on it that those crossbows are fired at incredible power, right? And sometimes there might be a chain on the crossbow and the shaft, right? And then you might yank at that chain if there's any wooden defenses, and you may be able to pull the defenses down, right? But that's what a Scorpio machine looks like. There. So if we go back to my illustrations, so this is one of those iron bolts fired from a Scorpio machine. So researchers believe these are evidence of a Roman attack that occurred roughly sometime maybe 203, 204 BC. And the local Messapi tribe had sided with Hannibal and Rome's nemesis Carthage during the Second Punic War, which caused Rome to retaliate and attack the settlement in 209 BC and later. The walls proved no match for the Roman army. Remember, it's a 20-foot thick wall, which was able to breach them and successfully take the city. During the following 2 centuries, the fortifications were gradually dismantled, and the large stone blocks were reused in new buildings. To read about Scorpio bolts and other ammunition launched against the city of Pompeii around 89 BC, go online to Weapons of the Ancient World Siege Weapons. So Pompeii was placed under siege in 89 BC. I didn't know that one. So again, that's where we are. And this again is a Ugento in Italy. And that is a lead projectile. And this is the wall. So I'm thinking that doesn't show all the thickness of the wall. So this is what they've been excavating. So this is only part of the wall. This must be sort of the front part of it. But they used they demolished lots of this wall. And obviously, this is a friendly tribute. One of those 9 crossbow bolts, which were fired by a Scorpio machine at the city of Agento, a city allied with the wonderful Hannibal. Right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. Roger's going to have a Cadbury's caramel. And right, let's see if there's any questions. Okay.
Not a question, but about a week ago, I was watching a program about Phoenician art, which I found I should have taken notes of times and dates and names, which I didn't. But there was sort of beautiful daggers and bowls and things that they'd got. But what they'd got was a group of people who today, they claimed that they were descendants from the Phoenicians. And also there was a writer, a different artist who was a writer, who wrote a book about the heroes of the Phoenician heroes, which is now taught to all the children of these people who are trying to keep something going of I suppose they're proud of their inheritance in a way.
So in other words, the Phoenician world lives on 4,500 years later.
Yes, and they'd got these young men now doing dancing and it really was quite an interesting program, mainly linked to the art. Of course, that's what I was watching.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it was yes, that they're still there, claiming to have this inheritance and be part of that.
Where did you say they were again?
I told you I didn't take notes. I should have taken notes.
Oh!
I'm terrible at learning words these days. I forget more words than I go, and I should have written it. If I'd known this was coming up, I'd have taken notes. But as it was, I was just watching it. I found it interesting, but I didn't get the details.
Okay.
What channel was it on, Han?
Well, it was on YouTube. YouTube.
Yeah. Well, if you could get some more information, and basically you can actually work out which one it was because you've got a history of stuff that you've watched on YouTube. There's a little.
I can probably find it.
There's a little window. Yeah.
Anyway,
thanks for that. And by the way, Mag, I'd say that me and Roger and Emma and Richard, David, are all coming in Emma's car. We're all going to be staying at your place, so they'll be totally pointless because there'll be no room to put any books.
No room for the books.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
Right, talking about Roger and his dirty books. Roger, anything you want to say?
Nothing wrong with no. Follow that fine. The script was interesting, but I have to study it more.
So you should, Roger. So you should. So after the break. We've got a little bit about carvings and stuff, and a few other bits and pieces. So yes, Oh, and that place in Spain that I think Andy was talking about, but it's something else. I gotta get one more image of those up in the break as well. Right, Margaret.
I sent you an email a week ago about this archaeological excavations at Cooper in the southeast tip of Italy, where they found. Is this what you've just been talking about?
No.
This was 450 lead projectiles.
Oh yeah, this
is the same one?
Yeah, it is the same one, but not Cooper. That's on the other side. But yeah, this is the same one. Yeah.
Oh right. Oh well. Apart from that, the Phoenicians, I always kind of associate them with wealth and seafaring people. Were they were kind of the Bronze Age, were they? Our Bronze Age?
They started off in the Bronze Age and were about in the Iron Age. It's just Rome. Rome changed everything.
But you know, there was that big there were problems in the Bronze Age in that area with trade and everything. Were they affected by that and the sea peoples that were about at the time?
Well, obviously, you got this sort of invasion of the sea people. We talked about that, the Mycenaeans, about 1,200 years BC. However, and all the way that affects Egypt and all the rest of it. But the Phoenicians were very much doing their thing anyway. So all that continued, and the sea people, and that really didn't affect the Phoenicians sort of over the most of the Mediterranean. So yeah, there would have been some effect, but obviously that's going to happen with a warlike people.
So they were not affected by that Bronze Age collapse.
They would have been, but it seemingly didn't affect them.
Oh, and
there would have been some. There would have been some effect, but exactly.
Their writing is like the Hebrew and the Arabic; it goes from right to left.
And we appreciate that.
There you go.
There you go. Good. Well, I've learned something tonight, so that's good. Right to left. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, David?
No, thank you.
Judith, the thing is, right, the problem is that if I ever went out for a walk with Judith, right, it would be extremely bizarre. Judith, anything you want to say?
Only that I read somewhere that the Phoenicians engaged in child sacrifice. Now, that might not be true. But it might be true.
No, we can't talk about that. We've done that now. No,
okay.
we're not doing that. There is some sort of we mentioned about children's remains being found in do you know what, right? We need to do that. I'm gonna try and chuck that in here, right? With Penny, yeah, well, I want to chuck that in there because that sort of completes that. That's to do with the Carthaginians, who were technically Phoenicians, but that wasn't child sacrifice. But then again,
there might have been a disease or a plague that, children die of all sorts of diseases that adults are immune to, don't they? So
exactly. So oh yes. I might be doing that dodgy thingamajig. Right, okay then. Andy.
I find the Phoenicians really interesting because if you go around to any archaeological site around the Mediterranean, there's always mention of them, and they're always there. And it's like they're these kind of weird people that don't really seem to live anywhere or do anything, but they've traded everywhere and been everywhere and influenced everything. And yet, when you see them on the map, they've only got a really small bit of land. So maybe
the Eastern Mediterranean, was it?
Yeah, but that's why they survived and kept going, because they didn't have a lot of possessions and they just relied on trade, and their trade was so wide the localized effect didn't affect them.
And in a way, I think there's a parallel with that, because there's a weird parallel when the Byzantine Empire was basically nothing left of it, in 1453, and Mehmed the Great conquered Constantinople, the old Byzantium. what was left of the Byzantine Empire was this weird model where they had these little bits of colony everywhere, and a little bit here and a little hermitage here, and that was like what was left of the Byzantine Empire, right? In a way, years earlier, that's like the Phoenicians. There's a little bit of them here, a little bit there, but you can't really set it on a map. But there's like an empire trading block, right? And I think that's what happens with lots of a lot. If something works, don't change it. And when you think about this, that there's a contrast. If you're trading and successful at trade with the way you're doing it, why do you need to conquer countries? And that's basically Andy's point. Conquering and having possessions keeps you fixed to the landscape. And obviously, when the Persians are capturing Phoenician settlements, they can just go off somewhere else because they're not really, they've got their ships, and they can just start somewhere else. And I think that's what Andy's point was. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. So before we have our break, let's do Emma and Dadus.
Just call me D.
That's it. Yeah, we'll call him D. That's it. It's dealt with.
Decided on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything, Emma?
No, not for me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think we haven't touched on it on your program, but all these things relate to religion. You know, if they were Muslim and the others had a different religion, they tried to invade places, convert the people, and I'm sure Richard the Lionheart went out there to kill all them.
But obviously that's a lot later, and yeah. I did mention religion earlier on, but when I mentioned religion earlier on, that's different from the model that you're talking about, because all these Phoenician towns and cities, it seemingly had their own little religion, their own take on religion, which is very different, for example, than modern religions, where you have to be a Catholic, or you have to be a Muslim, or you have to be a Hindu. I don't think the Hindus are like that, but basically, it's not. As long as you're doing the trading thing and you're trading and doing that, everything seems to work.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So, I got something right. Brilliant.
All my history relates to religion and land resources.
Got you.
You know.
On that note, I'll carry on.
All right.
All right. Okay.
I'll listen to what you're saying and add it up in my way. But
good. All right then. Well, we'll take it. We'll take a break now, folks.
All right then. I'll go for my cigarette. Thank you.
We'll have a good old drag. You know, I love doing that on set. Smoking the old drug. Yeah, everyone's laughing when I do that.
If you're a Londoner, it's the other way around.
Hey, I'll speak to you soon, man.
Hand over mouth.
Oh yes.
Speak to you in a minute, guys.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have some pudding.
Oh, what's your figure now?
I'm going to have some Greek yogurt with strawberries.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. It's,
Roger, what if you smothered me in honey, right? And we like got loads of ants to nibble it off my naked body.
what? What are you thinking? Go. Sure. Oh.
Isn't that incitement to riot?
What do you mean what's that going to... You can't have an incitement to riot with ants. Don't be so ridiculous.
Yeah.
What? Oh, guys, just let me have a break. Go away.
Right. Oh, silly. Oh. Oh. Yeah. How long would you stay on with the rescue, Anne?
It was I got called out at just around 12:30 and got back about 5.
At what age do you retire from them?
It's kind of retirement age, but it also depends on your fitness and your whether they need you. Nobody's mentioned anything about retiring yet to me, so
There's no rule though.
I just keep smiling and hiding at the back.
Yeah, I'm tough.
Yeah. Well, I take on the managerial side of things now, so I don't have to do so much of the physical side because that can be quite demanding. So,
well, exactly. Oh well, good. Because you've been involved with them for a fair time then, or?
I have, yeah, about 17 years now. So.
All right, so excellent. Well, plenty of rescue needed, and people there ready for it.
I thought I wasn't sure whether it was just our area or whatever, but talking to some of my colleagues, they're all saying the same thing, that it's actually in the last couple of years, basically since COVID, has got much busier. We have twice as many call outs as we did pre-COVID.
We've had enough round our shores with one thing sort of either into the sea with the tides, because there's some strong tides in this area with troubles. A friend of mine got stuck on the beach, needed the winch to get him off.
Yeah, easily done.
The air ambulance couldn't get in there and all the rest.
No, too close to the cliffs. Yeah.
On the cliff, it was too dangerous. I had to winch him up.
Yeah.
On the dog. But there's always something. People cut off with the tides, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a lot cut off by the tide because we've got mud flats that are lovely to good and hard and easy lovely to walk out on when the tide's not there. But they kind of
with being sucked into the mud around the Severn and stuff.
Well, we have that problem here as well, but it's fortunately not very often. But
Andy, do you know the sands well enough to take people walking over the bay?
No. I haven't been out in the bay. I haven't been out enough at all to do that. No.
It's very risky unless you're really sure yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're careful, you just need as long as you've got a nice walking stick with you, you can prod the sand before you step on it, and then So.
Yeah.
But it's knowing where the crossing points are, because you can't see the bottom because it's kind of muddy brown water from the silt in it.
Yes.
You can, if you get it right, it'll be knee deep. If you get it wrong, you'll be up to your waist.
Right. Deadly.
When you're up to your waist, is it kind of set like concrete?
Oh, in the mud. Well, that's what quicksand does. Normally with the kind of the sticky mud, you don't tend to get too deep in it, like knee deep. But the quicksand, you go straight in. Ooh. It's kind of liquid, and then the water goes away, and it goes rock hard.
They say the best thing is to try and swim out of it.
Yeah, if you can, but the quicksand is very deceptive. You can't see it. You can see sticky mud, and to be honest, if you get stuck in the sticky mud, you're an idiot. because you can see it, you can feel it as you go in, you can avoid it. If you lie down, sit down or lie down and spread your weight, you'll be able to pull yourself out. But people tend not to do that because they get covered in mud. But quicksand, you just literally will step in it and go up to your thigh almost instantly. But it looks like solid hard sand, and it is on the top. It just underneath it isn't. And then when you got your foot in it, suddenly all the water goes away from you, and it does go very hard.
Better to stay on dry sand if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or where you see tracks from something, perhaps.
Yes, that exactly. Yeah, a bit of common sense. Look for other tracks. Yeah.
Along the coast up the River Severn, a lot of tides there are deadly, and there's high tides on the area anyway, strong tides.
Yeah.
And there's so much mud in the Usk and one thing the other that it's deadly. And that Morecambe Sand thing, when you cut off at tides evening, quite near there's a little island, Lavernock.
Yeah.
And people go over there and don't seem to ask, even though there are warnings there, and get cut off. So rather than just stay there and wait for it to, return, they try and get back in. And the tide's too fast.
Yeah.
Another place, Ogmore, it's rip tides there, which best swimmers find difficult.
Yes.
So it's best to keep away. It looks like very nice, lovely beach. The river comes out on it and this and that, but no good. I always stayed away from it. But some won't, some adventure, and others get swept out to sea on these rafts and different things, totally fun things. And of course, the R&I are active then, but it's all being well. No, there's always something to be done with rescue, get it plenty of it on television with different things.
Yeah.
And I'm brave in these lifeboats with the R&I work yourselves.
Yeah.
Take a risk, especially in anything a bit rough weather, to actually save.
They're pretty good, the R&I. If they can get it in the water, they'll go. So.
Oh, yeah. But there's always something, somebody, somewhere. A lot of it could be avoided, I think. The people take risk or don't realise.
We had one recently where a lady was really upset that she got cut off by the tide over at
by the window.
You've moved it
around the corner from us.
Yeah, I said it's all. I told you when I did it.
She checked it online, and she'd got the little village nearby is called Silverdale, and she got a place called Silverdale in America. So the tide times were completely wrong. And it didn't say that. It just said Silverdale. She said, "Look, here's the tide times here." I'm going, "Well, no, it's not due. Yeah, it's another 6 hours or whatever. Just got the wrong one."
Yeah.
How are you funded, Andy? Are you a charity?
No, we're HM Coast Guard, meaning His Majesty's. We're a government-funded organisation.
Oh, that's good.
We're the only search and rescue organisation in the country that's actually nationally funded. All the rest, like police, ambulance, and fire, are all county funded. So,
because Mountain Rescue, it's all
they're voluntary. Yeah, they're charity, as are the R&I.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, we got that for the hills and mountains. It's a surprising various things in the place called Brecon Beacon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where they can. It's very nice for walking.
Yeah.
People get lost, fall down, break something.
Yeah.
And in not only the winter.
Well, it's very easy to damage your ankle or your leg if you just slip. And if you're on an 8-mile walk and you're halfway around, you're stuffed. So.
Oh, my friend fell off Helm Crag. He had to have Mountain Rescue out about a month ago.
Right.
He had to be stretchered down, broke his shoulder and his wrist.
Oh dear.
Yeah, tripped over his dog.
Nice. It's bad for your dogs. Yeah.
Roger, can I ask you something? Right, serious question. You were talking about Ogmore then, right? Butch swimmers really struggle with it. You're a butch swimmer. Would you be able to swim with me, Roger?
No. I'd be too afraid.
Butch swimmer.
Roger. Oh, by the way, I had these in the back of my car, right? Best by date 2018, right? And they're little sweets, and there's nothing wrong with them.
They'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sugar will preserve them.
Yeah,
They've no trouble. They're virtually all sugar, aren't they?
yeah.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Right, so we're going to get on to the next bit now, and you know what?
Well, Carl's very sweet, isn't he? Carl's very sweet. He'll be preserved forevermore.
What?
Yeah, I know I'm very sweet. I know I'm very sweet, and I know I'm very butch as well. You know, as I told you earlier on, when Michelle was talking away, I just mentioned about, you know, me doing this film, you know, naked with somebody else. Well, I've told her now, haven't I? So she doesn't need to know. So that's it. So I'm very butch in that. Very butch.
Very good.
Right. So
things you'll do for money.
I tell you what, right? 430 quid for 10 hours work. Flipping heck, I'm doing that.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's 43 quid an hour.
Oh, you're all about the money.
Oh, I'm very butch.
Sell out.
I'm very, very butch. Right. So talking about butch, right? Andy, do you think I'd make a lifeguard? You know, being very butch.
Oh yeah.
Do you think Claire will
just
do
need
it?
some little red budgie shorts for swimming in, and that's it, and a torpedo boy, and you'll be away.
Oh, do you think Claire would do it as well?
Probably not. She's got a bad knee.
Any excuse. Any excuse. So Emma was saying I'm obsessed with Claire. I'm not. She just comes up in conversation each week.
She does.
She does.
It's difficult to forget Claire.
She's had a bad week, has Claire.
What?
Yes.
She's had a bad week, hasn't she? Or a bad day, anyway.
Why she had a bad day?
Well, she
put her hand in a lawnmower when the blades were still going.
So bad. Really?
Mm.
I didn't know that. Didn't know she didn't tell us that she'd done that.
Yeah.
Put a hand in a lawnmower.
Mm.
Crazy.
That's not like Claire.
No, it's not like Claire at all. That.
No, she was having a bad day. I think.
Bad day.
Yesterday.
Oh,
God, that is a bad day. I don't know what I'm doing now. You throw me now. I feel I've got to phone Claire and ask her how she is.
I think you should.
She'd probably invite me over to have a look at her etchings in her room.
Is she a quiet girl, is she, or what?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah,
Right.
really. No.
Oh.
Right. Okay then. So, I wanted to mention this, right? And this is it's basically it's usually the three classical orders of ancient Greece, right? But it's got 5 on there, right? And basically what we've got these 5 classical orders of architecture. Tuscan, which is Etruscan, right? So you can get an idea where we're going from this. Etruscans, Tuscan. So we're talking about the 600-700 years BC. A Doric, Ionic, a typical Greek orders of carving with their temples, right? So you're talking about this sort of Doric and Ionic going back to the 450s, somewhere like that, when you're talking about the Parthenon in Athens. And then the word Corinthian is usually associated with ancient Rome, right? Just a simple way of thinking about this and talking about this. So basically, Tuscan is basically a simple way of carving columns, which you usually see when, for example, when you go to Cyprus and you go and look at the Tomb of the Kings, and you look at the carvings of peristyle sort of courtyards underground in the rock, they usually use this Tuscan form, right? So this is quite plain, right? But it's something that the Etruscans use quite a lot. Now, Doric, Ionic, as a typical issue associated with Rome, not Rome, ancient Greece, and what you see is lots of the great temples, for example, in Sicily, for example, in Greece, are usually using the Doric and Ionic. And when you go to Corinthian, this is really, really interesting. The Corinthian is really, really decorated with canthus leaves at the top of the capital, right? Usually all of these, at the bottom of all of these orders, the 5 of them, you can get a little bit of fluting. It's quite plain compared with the top, right? But we're really thinking about the Corinthian style, which has got these wonderful canthus leaves, which sort of crowns the tops of these columns. This is really typical Rome at the height of Rome, about AD 100. This is what you might see associated with the baths of Caligula or the baths of Hadrian, anything like this. And we do see Corinthian columns which have actually been found in Britain, right? Now, when I was doing this, I just wanted to do this a little bit of a taster into these styles today. And I sat down and I thought, do I invite you guys to tell me whether you want me to do more of this, right? More of this to do with carvings and stuff. And you can mention that when we do the questions, right? Because I thought I didn't want to go any further with this, but I wanted to basically chuck in here, right? So remember the Temple of Hera in all those wonderful films from the 1950s and 60s, and here is this great statue and she comes alive. There we go. So both the Doric and the Ionic order appear to have originated in wood. So that's really interesting. Now, where we think about Tuscan, right, that's usually in the stone carvings associated with the Etruscan tombs and stuff underground, which have survived in stone underground. However, we might then start think about the idea of carving columns is in wood, right? So the Temple of Hera in Olympia, again, over to Greece, is the oldest well-preserved temple of Doric architecture. Again, I'm not showing you an example for the deliberate reason, as I mentioned a few minutes earlier. It was built just after 600 years BC. And there's something else I want to check about that, right? Is that I know we've just been chucking dates in and stuff, right? But there's a period between roughly about 1,000 years BC and 600 BC where you've got a bit of a dark age in Greece, right? Where we're 1 minute we're seeing lots of things not happening, and the next minute you're seeing them building all these temples like the Temple of Hera in Olympia. So the Doric order later spread across Greece and into Sicily. There's some beautiful temples on Sicily, absolutely unbelievable, right? And actually, lots of those films like Clash of the Titans were actually filmed in Sicily because you've got these wonderful temples there. Where it was the chief order for monumental architecture for 800 years. So early Greeks were no doubt aware of the use of stone columns with bases and capitals in ancient Egyptian architecture. Ancient Egyptian architecture is very, very different from anything that we associated with the Greek and the Roman world, and that of other Near Eastern cultures. Although they were mostly used in interiors rather than as a dominant feature of all or part of exteriors in the Greek style. So something I just want to chuck in there as well. Lots of the temples that Alexander the Great come across with columns and stuff, right, were made of wood, right? So when Alexander the Great went on a bit of a bender, right, the temples were just set alight because they were not made of stone, they were made of wood. And did you know, here's a little bit of a fact that I'm just going to chuck in you, right? Did you know that Alexander the Great may have been alive when he was buried? Did we mention that last week? No. It's likely that he had some kind of virus that slowed down his heart, and he may have woken up in his own coffin alive, but obviously people thought he was dead. There you go. I thought I'd check that in. So if you want me to do anything more about anything like this, you need to let me know at the end, right? So, going back to this other thing that Andy mentioned about Spain, right? That we were talking about the Carthaginians, and we last week I basically, what Carthaginian remains do we have? We have a few sort of in Tunisia, right? And we really didn't go much further. Andy was saying, oh, he's visited this site in Spain. But I wanted to look a little bit further into that. So this is a site known as Cartagena, which is as we're told that this is a showpiece of the Carthaginian world, and these are little bits of remains of buildings and stuff. However, right, and what they've done a really, really great job of displaying this, right. And because what we've got this, right? So we've got this Punic period Carthaginian wall, roughly from maybe 210 years BC, and the Cartagena Punic wall. And this is a significant site when we understand Carthaginian fortifications, directly like the one that we saw before the break in Italy. And this is basically this is called the Punic Wall Interpretation Center at Cartagena. And what they've got in the form of excavations of some other Carthaginian remains at Cartea. And they've got a little museum there as well that look at the Carthaginian world, and Lucentum, which is Alicante. They talk about there's little bits of evidence of Carthaginian stuff there. And this is interesting. A place in Spain as well, known as La Villa Josa. They've got an industrialized area where the Carthaginians are working in silver and all the rest of it. And they've also got evidence of Phoenician remains of a site in this place known as La Villa Josa in Spain as well. I'm not exactly sure where that is. And there's more as well. There's another place in Spain. If I had a little map, and I could have shown you this, but this was just something at the last minute. So there's another place in Spain called Carmona, where there's evidence of a Phoenician and Carthaginian city going all the way back to the 500 years BC. And there's Frontera is also got Phoenician and Carthaginian evidence as well. So they are about little bits that are about, but obviously they've been built on by other civilizations like the Romans, who undoubtedly don't like the Carthaginians. So I decided to do this as a place de resistance, right? And I decided that what we would do, there you go. That was the thing I was going to do before I decided to chuck in this. We will do the foundation stuff with Rome, but before the break, I was poo-pooing the Carthaginian Phoenician sacrifice stuff. I didn't want to give too much away because I knew a little bit more than I was saying. Because in 2014, Carthaginians sacrificed their own children. There you go. So graves holding tiny cremated bones confirm accounts dismissed as Greek or Roman black propaganda. When you go looking at this on the internet, it basically says, did the Carthaginians sacrifice their own children? And it usually says, actually, they did, right? It wasn't just propaganda. So this is known as a tophet, basically a slightly domed, sort of half cylindrical thing. And this is a special cemetery dedicated to the burial of infants in like a pseudo dome, which actually survived. And this article, I can remember reading this one in 2014. I got the press cutting actually somewhere as well. And it says, just as ancient Greek and Roman propagandists insisted, the Carthaginians did kill their own infant children, burying them with sacrificed animals statues of Lloyd George and ritual inscriptions in special cemeteries to give thanks for favors from the gods, according to a new study. So in other words, Roger, right, things are going right in your life, Rog. You've got half a dozen children. You're saying, Rog, what we're going to do, thanks to things going right, we're going to sacrifice him over there, Rog. Is that all right? Job done. Rog, by the way, we're having a man-on-man relationship here with 6 children. I'm not sure how this is working, but we're just sacrificing one of our children, Rog. So this is something dismissed as black propaganda because in modern times, people just didn't want to believe it. However, Oxford University, who is behind the study with international colleagues of one of the most bitterly debated questions in classical archaeology, but when you pull together all the evidence, archaeological, epigraphic, and literary, like the Roman writers that we mentioned, Pliny or Plutarch or Appian or Livy, they did kill their children. And on the evidence of the inscriptions, not just as an offering for future favors, but fulfilling a promise that had already been made. There you go. So it goes on to say, this was not a common event, but it must have been among an elite because cremation was very expensive, and so was the ritual of burial. It may even have been a philanthropic act for the good of the whole community. So in other words, if you had lots, me and Roger, we've been together a long time. We decided to sacrifice a couple of our children, Rog, because we've got a lot of money. There you go. Argument has raged on the subject since cemeteries known as toffets, these are toffets, after the biblical account of a place of sacrifice. There we go, a toffet, place of sacrifice, were excavated in the early 1900s on the outskirts of Carthage in modern Tunisia, and then at other Carthaginian sites in Sicily and Sardinia. The graves held tiny cremated bones carefully packed into urns, buried under tombstones, giving thanks to the gods. One has a carving which has been interpreted as a priest carrying the body of a small child. And I think I've actually got that. Or there, I think, is that the one? I'm not sure. I don't think it is. But he's not carrying a child, is he? No. Some archaeologists and historians saw the finds as proving ancient accounts of child sacrifice. Others insisted they showed tender respect for cherished children who died before or soon after birth. Now, this is the question. That is the question that we're debating now. Did they lovingly cremate their children who had died because of a disease? Or did they sacrifice their children? But you can actually sacrifice a child that's already dead. Yes, you can. Define what sacrifice is. So the argument's been rumbling on for many centuries. The inscriptions are unequivocal. Time and again, we find the explanation that the gods heard my voice and blessed me. It cannot be that so many children conveniently happen to die at just the right time to become an offering. And in any case, a poorly or dead child would make a pretty feeble offering. If you're already worried about the gods rejecting it, then let's just keep an open mind. Then there is the fact that the animals from the sites, another toffet, which were beyond question, sacrificial offerings, are buried in exactly the same way, sometimes in the same urns with the bones of the children. Although hundreds of remains were found, there were far too few to represent all the stillbirth and infant deaths of Carthage. According to a writer called Quinn, there were perhaps 25 such burials a year for a city of perhaps 500,000 people. And as we know, the Romans set light to the city with 750,000 people in it in the year 146 BC. That's because all the Carthaginians went there. The Roman historian Diodorus, there's another Roman historian, Diodorus, right? They just keep coming. Can I just stop a minute? When you look at the Roman world, there's so many of their writers we've got stuff from. There's loads of them, right? Loads of them. Anyway, and other ancient historians gave graphic accounts of Carthaginian child sacrifice. There was in their city a bronze image of Kronos, extending its hands, palms up and sloping towards the ground, so that each of the children were placed thereon, rolled down, and fell into a sort of gaping pit filled with fire. So, in other words, children were thrown into a fire. Diodorus even said that some citizens who brought children from poor people and reared them especially for sacrifice, believed misfortunes had resulted because they had not sacrificed their own offspring. So by sacrificing somebody else's, it's bad luck. But if you haven't got any children to sacrifice, Rog, what are you going to do, Rog? You know, you and I need more children, Rog. Shut up, Rog. The argument has been passionate for years, with scientists often reaching opposite conclusions from the same bone fragments. It's saying that 4 years ago, a group of scientists published a paper saying that the cremated remains did not indicate infant sacrifice. So there we go. And it goes on to say in Antiquity in 2014, 11 years ago, publishing a new paper on the same bones, insisting that the earlier study got the science of burnt infant bones wrong, and therefore greatly overestimated the number who died before birth rather than being murdered in infancy. Interesting. And obviously talking about children and the sacrifice of children is really, really difficult. And personally, for me, I haven't told this story for a long time. When I was young, not to know any better, I was working with this archaeologist, and he basically said, he basically said, I was saying to him, oh, there's these remains of little children here, right? Which I was lovingly excavated. And he said, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in babies' bones. Just put a mattock through it, right? So mattocking through the remains of children's remains, right, for me has always left a really bad feeling to me, because I was told to do it, right? And I feel really bad for what happened, but I think I was only 10 years old. But anyway, the point is that children's remains and how we deal with them and study them are a very, very difficult thing indeed. And this story is a very difficult thing to talk about. So the feeling that some ultimate taboo is being broken is very strong. It was striking how often colleagues, when they asked what I was working on, reacted in horror and said, oh no, that's simply not possible. You must have got it wrong. I.e., you must have got it wrong that the Carthaginians were sacrificing their children. We like to think that we're quite close to the ancient world, that they were really just like us. The truth is, I'm afraid that they really weren't. You can believe what you like about that statement. And I think I've got something else I wanted to mention about this before we go on to the last bit tonight. And when I was doing the research for this earlier on, it was just a quick thing, wasn't it? And to answer that question, and this is quite useful here, and it's actually come from a question that somebody asked. They asked, did the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians actually sacrifice their infants to the gods, or is it a myth? Right. So we oversimplifying this. And many Carthaginian settlements, archaeologists have found cemeteries full of the remains of infants, apparently cremated and then buried in urns. We don't know for sure if these infants were human sacrifices, but there are details of the remains that indicate that these weren't normal graves. The bones are often mixed with those of lambs or other animals, and there seems to have been little care given to the individual remains. Some urns contain bones from multiple infants. I don't know what this is really saying, but I just given you the information. And the inscriptions on monuments at the sites are ambiguous, but generally seem to speak of receiving blessings from the gods, and never name any of the infants buried at these sites. So in other words, you're sacrificing a child that you're not given a name to, right? But where's the proof that this is actually a child of your own, and all these different things. For a long time, historians tended to argue that Roman accounts of infant sacrifice in Carthage were slander directed against their hated enemy. But the evidence from these sites, combined with Greek and Hebrew accounts that also discuss human sacrifice among the Carthaginians, makes a very strong case that, yes, infant sacrifice was an accepted part of their society. And just looking at this now before we finish this last bit and we go on to the final thing, Moloch is a tomb used in the Hebrew Bible. Moloch, Moloch, specifically the book of Leviticus, in which it seems to be a foreign deity or cult to whom sacrifice is offered. Moloch is somebody that you offer a human sacrifice to, mentioned in the Bible. It has long been assumed that Moloch was a Canaanite god, from the Levant, just sort of north of Jerusalem, that type of area, and that Leviticus is condemning human sacrifices made in his name. And in the medieval period, some scholars connected Moloch to the Carthaginian infant sacrifices. So it wasn't the Canaanites after all, or was it? And finally, however, it's unclear if there was ever an actual god called Moloch, or whether he was worshipped in Phoenicia or Carthage. Some historians have suggested that Moloch, or MLK, was the Punic term for sacrifices or a festival in which sacrifices were made, not an entity in its own right. So the sacrifice of Moloch, they're saying, rather than a god, is where you sacrifice your children or animals or lambs. Others have suggested Moloch may have been a title, not an individual. The Bible also uses the Semitic term Baal, meaning Lord, as people would sacrifice a lamb, lamb to slaughter, lamb to God, as if it was the name of the specific deity. So Moloch could be a similar case. God, I just want to say something after this, actually. After this thing, the common image of Moloch as a bull-headed deity is purely the creation of medieval and early modern artists, and there's no connection to real Punic religious practices. So we'll never know. But I just want to say something, right? I want to say something. I don't know if you feel this is me being over this, but I would find it really difficult to sacrifice a lamb, right? That my sheep have produced, and I may have helped bring into the world, and being a connectivity to farming, right? I would find that very difficult. So what's the difference between sacrificing a lamb and a human child? I just want to put that in there. Right, so let's just, I just wanted to finish off tonight with this point here. And it's about, okay, it's about the foundation legend in regards to Romulus and Remus, right? So we've all heard of Romulus and Remus, right? And we all know that Rome in some time was actually founded, right? The foundation year of Rome is 753 BC ab Burbae Condita. And I tell you what, right? This is something that I know the date of by heart. It's ingrained in me. If I've forgotten any other date in my lifetime, right, this is the date that I remember, right? And the founding of Rome, right? And so you think about the founding of Rome. The Roman myth held that their city was founded by Romulus and Remus. Romulus killed his brother and established a city on Palatine Hill. So there's the Palatine Hill. One of the 7 hills. By 600 years BC, the 7 hills had unified into a single town. So this is all one single town, right? So Severian Wall wasn't built until the people of Gaul sacked Rome 300 odd years later, right? So this is key. This is really important. And let's just give you a few dates right? Let's just give you a few bits of information, right? And maybe talk about the myth legend as well, right? So let's just do this. The legendary account was still much discussed and celebrated in Roman times, known as the Paralia Festival on the 21st of April, was considered to commemorate the anniversary of the city's founding during the late Republic. And that aspect of the holiday grew in importance under the empire until it was transformed into something known as Romea, which is the festival of the founding of Rome. Most modern historians dismiss these ancient accounts of a single founder, and how much of this is actually true. But there's always this sort of thing that you've got this legend, and you've got something being founded, that the foundation myth. And so what we could do is let's just give you the actual foundation myth, because we're doing Rome for a long time, right? So Romulus and Remus. I'm just going to make sure that we go. We'll just do this, right? So let's look at Romulus and Remus as they are. And okay, I'm just making sure I've got the right story a minute, because there's several. Right, okay. So let's look at Romulus and Remus being suckled by the wolf. And this is what they say it looked like. Probably not a wall. There wouldn't have been a wall around it then, but obviously this is all the hills and everything. That's going to create the great city of Rome. And there we go, Romulus and Remus on the house of the she-wolf at the Grand Palace of Brussels. So the best known legend, Romulus and Remus, are the grandsons of Numitor, the king of Alba Longa. Alba, Scotland? Maybe not. After Numitor is deposed by his brother Amulius and his daughter Rhea Silvia, is forced to become a Vestal Virgin, right? So this is where we get the Vestal Virgins from. There was a temple of the Vestal Virgins that was still operational in Rome up until roughly late 380s, right? Until all the Vestal Virgins were no longer Vestal Virgins, right? They were not allowed to have a Vestal Virgin temple. So this Vestal Virgin becomes pregnant, allegedly raped by the war god Mars, right? And delivers the two illegitimate brothers. So in other words, a Vestal Virgin is raped by Mars, the Roman god, right? Amulus, who's the Amulus, orders that the children be left to die, right? So basically, their horrible relative is said they've got to be left to die on the slopes of the Palatine, which is the Palatine Hill, right? Which in other words directly links with this, right? The Palatine Hill overlooks the river Tiber, which flows through Rome. But they are suckled by a she-wolf in a cave known as the Lupercal Cave, and then discovered by the shepherd Faustulus, and taken in by him and his wife Acca, right? So the Roman writer Livy, and we'll look at these Roman writers next week, Livy combines Acca and the she-wolf, considering them most likely to have been referred to as a prostitute. So in other words, the person who's looking after them, the wife of Faustulus, is being interpreted as a prostitute. But equally, Acca might have had large bearing breasts, right? And to be seen as a she-wolf. So it might be that instead of them being looked after by a wolf and found in a cave, they were actually originally found by Acca, who had large bearing breasts because she'd been a prostitute and given up their children, and then this is what Livy's saying, but let's just go to the fact that they were being suckled by a wolf, and then eventually were found by Faustulus. Eventually reveals the brothers' true origins, and they eventually, right. So Faustulus gets rid somewhere along the line. Amulus, the boy's relative, who has asked for the boys to be exposed, right? He is then deposed, and then what happens is that somewhere along the line, the legend then comes into play with these two boys. The big moment where these two boys come into play, and they come into play with the landscape that is around them, right? Where's that bloody image? Is it there? No, not that one. The other one. Let's look at the landscape, right? So very important this, because we need to know what's going on, right? So finally, the twins then come into conflict during the foundation of the city. They're destined to form a city or some kind of town in the year 750. Well, they were born in the foundation of the city was 753 BC. But anyway, so the dispute is variously said to have been over the naming of the city. So on the day 753 BC, Romulus and Remus, who were trying to establish a city, right, had an argument, right? And apparently the city was actually founded either at the Palatine Hill or the Aventine Hill, right? Now, what happened then is some accounts say that Romulus slays his brother Remus with his own hand. Others say that Remus and sometimes Faustulus are killed in a general melee. So they have a fight. Remus is killed and Romulus wins, right? So then what happens? Is in some kind of weird sort of homage to his brother, Romulus ritualistically plows the general area of where the city of Rome is going to be, and apparently erects a wall around it, which is really unlikely. And Romulus invites in exiles, criminals, runaway slaves, rapists, murderers to establish this city. You know where we're going with this? I think we do. The city becomes larger, but also acquires a mostly male population. So it's a city of men. Can you see where we have actually gone? When Romulus attempts to secure the women of neighboring settlements by diplomacy fail, he uses the religious celebration of consualia to abduct the women of the Sabines, the Sabine women. According to Livy, the Roman writer, with the Sabines rally an army to take their women back, and the women force the two groups to make peace and install the Sabine king Titus as the co-monarch with Romulus. So in other words, after nicking the Sabine women from the Sabine tribe, there's a fight. And what happens is the Sabine people and Romulus's people form an alliance. And then finally, right, we could talk about Aeneas, but we'll just leave that to you, for you two to read that, you lot to read that. The story. Oh, we just found another dead shrew. The story has been theorized by some modern scholars to reflect anti-Roman propaganda from the late 300 BC, but more likely reflects an indigenous Roman tradition, given the Capitoline wolf, which likely dates to the 500s. Regardless, by the 200s, it was widely accepted by the Romans and put onto some of Rome's first silver coins. in 269 BC. If you go on the internet, you can find there's loads of these coins which show Romulus and Remus being suckled by a wolf. You can find them on eBay for like a £5. There's loads of them. I used to have a few. It's finally said that the myths of Romulus and Remus are popular expressions of some universal human need or experience, rather than borrowing from the Greek, East, or Mesopotamian stories of foundation. Inasmuch as the story of the virgin birth, these basically their step parent is actually a wolf. So what the Romans are going to do something different, right? So what we've learned from this in this story is the following, and this is where we'll finish. The first thing we've learned is that Rome starts off as a highly masculine society, right? With people founding the city of Rome, right? That's the one thing, yes. The next thing is that the Romulus has to steal women from another tribe, right? So that's the next thing. And it basically issues that edict that the Romans seemingly from very early on don't have as much respect for women as we do in modern day society. So women are seen to be acquired items to offer the survival of the population, not co-people within the city and landscape of Rome, as Rome would develop throughout the next hundreds of years. So I wanted to share that with you tonight, this foundation thing with Romulus and Remus, and it's basically, you know, this you need to know this. You need to know this before we go on, right? And before you get totally bored. But and there's basically a funerary urn to do with the Etruscans, but I just wanted to chuck something else in. I just want to chuck a big red herring in, right? Most Roman historians, right, say that Rome is founded roughly around the 750s, right? Plutarch, 753. A Roman writer known as Fasti, 753. Dionysius of Halicarnassus says 752. Polybus, 751. Cato Didorius, 751. But listen to this. There's one or two historians who say that I'm wrong and that all the other historians are wrong. And there's a Roman historian called Nevius who says that Rome was founded 1,100 years BC, 3,100 years ago, right? And that's rather interesting. But we're going to finish this today, and that's it. Roman historians next week, so we can understand them a bit more. So we'll just move from there. We'll just show you that Capitoline Hill, Palatine Hill, the wall which would eventually go around the Severian Hill, Tiber River, Tiber Island. Near there's the tomb of Hadrian near Tiber Island, and this would eventually become this great, amazing city of Rome. Which, by the way, I've never ever been to Rome. A fascination with it all my life, but never been there. So we will finish, and we'll just stop sharing, and hopefully you guys have learned a lot tonight. And you definitely need your pen ready next week. And what I might do next week is to lighten the load next week. We'll do Roman historians, and I want to do the geographers that discovered Britain properly, right? And they are Phoenician based, right? A little bit different from what we did the other week, but we need to do 753, and that's Aberbe Condita at the foundation of the city of Rome. Right. And I'm trying to find a spelling of that now. I can't actually find it, but Aberbe Condita. Right, Roger.
Yes, no, that's fine. I'm signing off now.
Hey, no, baby, Rog. I'll see you next week.
Roger.
Yeah, see you all next week.
All right, Rog.
Okay.
All right, Rog.
Cheers.
Roger, we'll think about starting a family again. All right, love.
Oh, never again. No. Oh, tell me no.
He admits it.
Oh no. See ya.
No, Rog.
Bye.
Hi, Rog.
No, Rog. Talking about starting a family. Don't worry, David. I haven't got eyes for you. Anything you want to say?
No, thank you very much. No, thank you.
Not you.
Okay.
Night,
No,
all.
David.
Bye,
David.
David.
Thanks for joining us. Right. Okay. Who else have we got now? Oh, I got a lovely cup of tea. Thanks to Michelle. Oh, by the way, Michelle, look at that. I've got a Whisper Instant, right? That's been in my car for like 3 years, but that's going to be really nice. Do you know, the best way to stop anybody eating is to give them a best by date and just gobble it yourself. Talking about scrobbling things, Andy. Oh, by the way, did you get the invite for the money? I want your money, Andy. I had a PayPal. I sent it over.
I'll just have a quick look now. Yes, I've got it. Thank you.
Right, good.
And I can tell you the name of that place as well.
Right, we're writing it down. Go on.
It's Empuries. It's EMPURIES.
Empuries.
Never
Yeah.
heard of it. All right, then.
Yes.
I've written
It's
that
near
down.
Girona.
Ah,
Oh, right, fair enough. Well, we'll try. We'll. Oh, I'm gonna have a look at that after this.
I'll ask
Anyway.
my son-in-law. He's from Girona.
All right. Right. Yeah, it's on the, it's right on the coast.
You don't
It's
have to get around a bit, look.
kind of an archaeological museum. Yeah.
I'll ask him about
Greco-Roman city, but I think there's Carthaginian stuff there
yes.
as well.
that. Right.
So they should. Anything else, Andy?
No, thank you. I've always kind of find that whole story of Romulus and Remus interesting. Thinking, well, where's that come from? You know, how did that? I mean, you know the old thing, myths and legends or whatever. There's always some truth in it. So, be interesting. We'll never know, I'm sure, but.
Exactly. But there's one thing. The last emperor of Rome was called Romulus. And that was in 476. So an empire that lasted from 753 BC to 476. So you know that's quite a big chunk of time. You know, it's really impressive that. I just think if the historians are right, maybe Rome was founded before.
Yeah, I think that's more, archaeologically and historically, that's much more likely. But
yes.
But it's interesting the whole angle of the male thing there, because kind of wonder, these stories are written by people of the period with the politics and the culture of the time. And it certainly would explain a lot more, but it just sounds rather unlikely as well. But
can I just say something that okay, the others are going to miss out on this, but just 2 points. Ab urbe condita, AB, then the next word is urbe, URBE, then the next word is condita, CONDITA, ab urbe condita. So if you ever see anything Roman, AVU, start again, AUV, or AV, start again, AUC or AVC, AUC or AVC, that means ab urbe condita, right? And the dating works as follows, and this gets even more complicated, right? In the Roman calendar, if you go by this, year 1 is AUC 754, right? Year 0 is AUC 753. However, the Romans really didn't, this was not really the Roman way of doing things, because you would usually put it in the reign of the Roman emperor. So you'd say in the 3rd reign of Hadrian or the 4th reign of Trajan. Or if the Roman emperor didn't reign for a year, then you're buggered. So when there was the Roman, when there was the year of the four emperors, right, in AD 79, that must have been really confusing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do actually have Roman emperors that existed for a week or a few weeks, and they just issued half a dozen coins. There were altogether roughly, when I say roughly, 121 Roman emperors. However, there might be more that we don't know about. It's a bit like leaders of Anglo-Saxon Britain, that you get. You might get an Anglo-Saxon leader that nobody wrote anything about, or the documents were destroyed. And you suddenly find this coin, and the only evidence of this leader of Mercia or a leader of Canterbury was just on the issue of a coin. And there's one or two Roman emperors like that.
Yeah.
So Anne's nearly fallen asleep. Anne.
I was thinking about the controversy of these babies being murdered by the Carthaginians. And I find it very difficult to accept it fully as it was explained. Firstly, when you think parents will do so much to protect their own children, they couldn't mind anybody else's going. But if you think how we get inheritance and everything built up where everything is, make sure that their own get everything. And I think that's a problem. But also I wonder if and they were buried in a, and it may have been that they were very sick, ill children.
Yes.
And also it could be if the Romans were writing about it, they hated the Carthaginians. So wouldn't that be a good tale to tell?
Yes. Yeah. All of what you said is completely correct. All of everything that you've said is completely correct. How I've even said it in my lots of historians are saying, and archaeologists are saying, well, actually, this must have happened. But even when we're talking about, for example, bog bodies, right? We think about did these people willingly die? Did this happen? Did that happen? And it's a very difficult one sometimes. It really is. So it's difficult to quantify. So whereas I like to believe that they didn't do this,
dark, isn't it?
I don't want to believe that they didn't do this, and maybe they sacrificed their children because they were so ill. And also the other thing as well is they're talking about an average of 25 of these happening a year in any one city, and then you're thinking, well, it's not that many. And then maybe I'm going to really say something horrible. Maybe it was a Downs child that was extremely ill, right? And they thought, right, we need to assist this child to die because it's not going to have much of a life. So, but we can't analyze that from the bone record.
That could be kindness, but I would say you wouldn't think that they would. If you almost feel it would have to be something like that, because most parents they do anything to defend their children, don't they? So I just find it hard to accept. I'm not saying.
Yeah. I found it very difficult saying what I've just said because it's not acceptable. But if you've got, if for example, you've got a perfectly healthy child, right, but the child has just had a really bad illness, right, then you might need to sacrifice that child. It's
kindness. I mean, if the child is really damaged, brain damaged or blind or something, it could be a kindness, couldn't it?
Yes.
Rather than that it was something done for the gods. Yes, it would be something that the parent would make.
But it could be though.
In a way of loving the child. It could. I mean, sometimes killing them. I mean, didn't the earlier the nomads earlier than that had infanticide just to maintain the population because they couldn't carry everything about.
Yeah, well, that's
So, you know.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have let the child get very old before they did that, would they? Again, because
no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. Well, we don't really know. So
No.
yeah, it's one of those things. It's one of those things. Anyway, thanks for that. And obviously, Carthaginian writers. Where are they?
Well, as I'm saying, if the Romans were saying it, they would blacken the character, wouldn't they, of the Carthaginians because they hated them. That's what I'm saying. So if it was all coming from the Roman writers, if it was Carthaginian writers, it might be different.
All barbarians, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at this. While Carthaginian literature is not as extensively preserved as some of the ancient cultures, several writers are known. Do you know what? Right? That's not. There's a Carthaginian writer called Mago who wrote a comprehensive agricultural manual. Is one of the most well known. Additionally, there's Philinus, wrote a history of the First Punic War. Hanno, the navigator, documented his voyages.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon of Carthage also wrote works on history and biography. And do you know what? To celebrate this we will do Hanno next week as well, because it's exactly what we're doing. We will do Hanno next week because that aids in what we've been talking about. The Carthaginians really didn't tell us about themselves, but we will have a little bit about that next week. So right, so we've done Margaret. I think
you haven't.
All right, Margaret, come on, spit it out. We haven't got all month.
Have they actually found any bones of these ancient people from 700 and odd BC?
What do you mean?
Any skeletons? Any skeletons of these Sabine women that they can do a DNA check on?
You're talking about the archaeological evidence from ancient Rome.
Yes.
That's a really interesting one. Hang on a minute. The answer is no, because we hang on a minute. I'm just gonna say we don't actually, we've got, it's all obscure and they would be cremated remains anyway. Yeah.
Right.
But the problem is that's a really difficult one, because obviously Rome's changing a lot and everything's going to be damaged. So no, that's gonna be something for another day.
And as for the children, well, these ancient civilizations, keen believers in the afterlife and going to a much better place, and maybe they thought they were doing the children a favor by sending them, sacrificing them for the good.
Yes, and do you know what? Something that I've been wanting to say. I saw the film 28 years later today, right? And I'm not going to tell you. There's one scene in it, right, where somebody needs to die, right? And I was just finding that incredibly difficult. And then it was like, right, okay, the person's got a critical illness. And the actor was saying, well, let's end this person's life while they still can understand that they can end in a nice place rather than end in a bad place, right? And then I attributed that to myself. If my memory starts going, if I start, and then I will turn around and say, look, I want to end my life. It's my choice. Right? Aren't we talking about the same thing with these children? Isn't it the same thing?
Well, they didn't have any
the
choice.
child wouldn't be, and if you're now making a case for euthanasia, but children make that choice. Somebody
they don't have that choice. But
no, children don't have that choice. But what I'm trying to do is,
they were mercy killings for children that were born as rejects.
Yes, could be something like a kindness, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be that they were being cruel. It would be a kindness if they were born deformed.
The parents,
good life, are they?
saving the child's life of 60 years of punishment by whatever their problem is, like spina bifida, stuff like that. And it was a legitimate way of ending the life, sending it back to the gods, maybe by cremation. They were ceremonial killings.
Yeah.
And I think that today, a child is born, the technology of hospitals is so good, it survives, and the parents have got 60 years of wheeling the body around in a wheelchair or whatever, feeding it, changing its nappies, are committed to a horrible life, you know. So I can go along with that.
Well, you can go along with that. It's just this idea of if they've got just a well child.
If it was a well child,
they would take.
I wouldn't agree. Yeah.
Can I just? Yeah, sorry, Dave. Just carry on. Finish what you were saying.
Well, it's controversial. Even now, they're debating it in Parliament. If this child survives and it's well enough, but not quite well enough, the government has to support them to keep going
forever.
For 60 years.
Yeah.
You know, how do you weigh that up? It's money against life.
Can I just say something really important here, right? Yeah. The Romans are putting this from a high and mighty perspective, right? I was going to say this earlier on. We're talking about two children, right, that are left to die, right? Because somebody is Romulus and Remus are left to die, right? And you know what? If this is something the Romans are proud of, right? Our foundation fathers, Romulus and Remus, are left to die, right? On the banks of the River Tiber, or if you want to put them on the Palatine Hill, but they're left exposed to die, right? We're proud of this. We're going to expose our two children, right? That's far worse than what the Carthaginians are doing, right? But the Romans are proud of this, and we accept. But these two boys live. And the other thing as well is, right, one thing that we don't talk about, we're so much loving Rome, but one thing that we don't talk about is the amounts of burials that have been found in Britain and elsewhere, where a few years ago they found what they believe to be a brothel in southern England, right? And they found a pit with loads of infant burials that had just been chucked into a pit. And they worked out that this was a brothel, right? And the children were just discarded. In the Roman world, right? And again, another fact, in the Roman world, if you have a girl being born, right, that girl does not have rights as a human being until she's 5 or 7 years old, right? And it was within Roman law that if you had a girl, that you could just allow the girl to be exposed on the rubbish dump, right? Now, that is far worse than anything that we're saying with the Carthaginians, I believe.
It happened in China until quite recently as well, didn't it?
Yeah, China.
In India.
In Romania and China.
Yeah.
Dying rooms in Romania. Do you remember that?
Yes. So if the Romans want to be high and mighty, right, they can have that, and they can have that back at them every single time. Right. Okay, then, Judith. By the way, I'll try and get your
completely depressing. I've got nothing else to say.
We're signing off.
All right, then.
It's a long debatable thing, that.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay. Emma, anything you want to say, Emma, before we finish? No, she's gone. She's not there. All right, then. Anyway, I'm really glad we did that tonight. It's 9:53, even though we're starting a lot earlier. Oh my God, it's going to get to 9. It's going to get to 10:30 again. Oh my God. Right. If nobody wants to say anything else, really appreciate your support. Anyone who's got any monies to pay now, I think you've already done it. Anyway, thank you for that for the next 2 months. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say good night. Anne, Emma, David, Judith, Margaret, Andy, and the Pope, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Carl. Bye, everyone.
No, night, Judy. Hey, Jude.
Very, very.
No, Emma, David, Richard. You all right? What time you got work tomorrow? All right, then we'll get everything out, including a hat.
We won't get everything out.
Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight. We did an unusual thing. I was looking at the meeting chat on 1, nothing on that box, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and nothing in that chat box 8, 9, 10.